Welcome to Paul's Passive House. When I talk about remodeling and retrofitting my 1950s ranch home into a passive house, I often hear the same question. Well, why would you want to do that? Why would you want your house to be that efficient? This has always struck me as odd because it's kind of like asking someone who's remodeling or repairing a boat, well, why do you want it to be watertight? It's a silly question if you ask me, but I always hear it. People ask me this all the time, and they look genuinely confused. The following are pictures of different temperatures taken during different times of the year, followed by the uninsulated temperature of my addition versus the insulated temperature of the main footprint of my house. Now, to remind all of you, I'm currently working on my addition, so it's not finished. I have finished the main footprint of my house, although it's not 100% finished. I do have all my thermal insulation installed in the attic and the walls, but it's not 100% airtight yet. So these temperature differences that you're about to see are not totally accurate because for the insulated portion, it's actually going to get better. So let's look at the first one. So the first image, this is a picture of the temperature here in Denver. It was 96 degrees at 3 p.m. In my uninsulated addition, it was 91 degrees. And in the insulated portion of my house, it was 75 degrees. Now, just to be crystal clear here, this is without using any HVAC at all. I wasn't using any temperature control. Here we have a different part of the year. The next picture, it says it's 68 degrees, and that's at 4 p.m. The uninsulated addition is at 85 degrees, while the insulated portion of my house is at 68 degrees. And on the south side of my house, the insulated portion, it's 69 degrees. So not only is the insulated portion of the house uniformly the same temperature, but it's also a much more comfortable temperature, 69 degrees instead of 85 degrees, again, in the uninsulated portion of the house. Skipping ahead, we see it's now 43 degrees. It's midnight in Denver. In the uninsulated portion of my house, the temperature is 45 degrees, while in the insulated portion of my house, the temperature is 64 degrees. Now we get to even later in the year. It's 8 a.m. The temperature is showing 38 degrees outside. The uninsulated portion of my house is 34 degrees, while the insulated portion of my house is 59 degrees. So you have 4 different temperatures, wildly different, at 4 different times of the year. We only see about a 15-degree temperature swing in the insulated portion of my house. However, in the uninsulated portion of my house, we have a high of 91 degrees, a low of 34 degrees, which gives us a temperature swing of 57 degrees. Now, if you're sitting around your house scratching your head as to why I would do this, first and foremost, this saves me tons and tons and tons of money. Changing the house's temperature in the winter from 59 degrees up to, let's say, 65 or 67 costs me hardly anything at all when you compare it to having to raise the temperature from 34 degrees. Likewise, in the summertime, when it's 96 degrees outside, it's much, much easier to cool a home that's at 75 degrees than it is to cool a home that's at 91 degrees. Not only do I save a lot of money, but the comfort of my house is greatly and drastically improved. At no time during the year, during these 4 measurements that I took, was my house at a temperature that I couldn't stand. At 75 degrees, I was comfortable. It was a little warm, but I was comfortable. At 69 degrees, it was comfortable. I was a little bit warm again, but it was comfortable. At 64 degrees, it was about the perfect temperature for yours truly. And at 59 degrees, it was a little bit chilly, but not uncomfortable. Again, very manageable temperatures for Homo sapiens. When you contrast that with the 91-degree day inside, hugely uncomfortable, almost unlivable. The 85-degree day, also almost unlivable. The 45-degree day is way too cold. There's no way I could actually be in the home comfortably at that temperature, and 34 degrees is even worse. Now, again, to remind you, all these temperatures were taken absent of any HVAC. I wasn't using a heater or an air conditioner in order to mitigate or regulate the temperature of my home. These were just the temperatures in my home after a 48-hour period. Are you still questioning whether or not you should insulate your home to the Passivhaus standard? You shouldn't be. Following along with the build now, I'm measuring and installing the fascia board that's going to go underneath the drip edge. It skips ahead here because I think I ran out of batteries or something, but you can see here that it's all installed now. I had to cut it and install it and fill in some gaps with some polyiso foam, but now I have a fascia board that I can nail or screw into for gutters, which was one of the big problems I had to solve here. I had to add all of this zip sheathing, but I couldn't extend the roof line, so it had to fit underneath the drip edges. I was able to make it fit, and the method I used to do that was to use a zip R sheathing that was only 1 inch thick. Luckily, I had some. I think I've mentioned this a million times now, but I just buy everything used or over purchases. So whenever I go online, I just get whatever I can. So one day it was zip R sheathing that was 2.5 inches. The other day it was zip R sheathing that was 1 inch. Another day it was zip R sheathing that was 2 inches. And I just use what I have as best I can. This is a good shot of that opening I cut in the wall for the door. I made sure to mark where all the studs are so I didn't lose them as I was installing the zip system. It's important to do that before you forget, because once you put a piece on, it's too late. The electrical in the addition posed a significant problem. It was wired a certain way, and I had to rewire large portions of it. This is one example where I had to drill a hole into the top plate in order to run wire through it and then reconnect the wire later. This was all just planning ahead. I knew I was going to run into a problem, so I sat for a while, scratched my head, probably scratched my ass, and then figured out, oh, you know what? If I do it like this, I'll be able to connect it later. So I just made it available for me for a later connection. Now, I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you have the option to use nails, with a nail gun especially, you should. If you can find nails long enough to secure sheathing, you should buy them. If you can find nails for flooring or whatever, if you can avoid using screws at all costs, you should. They're so much faster, and they're nearly just as strong, if not stronger, depending on the use. If there was one advantage for me using screws at this point was that I was taking off and putting on, and then taking off again, and then putting on again, this sheathing multiple times as I got further and further along in the retrofit. But I know at this point that this is the last time I'm going to install this particular piece, which is why I'm putting so many screws in it. But boy, would that have been so much easier had I used a nail gun. The conspiratorially minded of you might think that this is all just an elaborate scheme to show you my rear end. If you go through all the video footage, there's an awful lot, maybe a suspicious amount of footage of just my rear end. Bending over, leaning to the side. It always seems that I'm in front of the camera and that you're looking at my ass. There might be something to that, although I will say that it just so happens to be a coincidence, an unfortunate but real coincidence. Here you get to see the satisfying footage of me installing the mineral wool insulation. I can tell you from experience that mineral wool is a delight to work with. It's simple, it's easy, it cuts really well, it forms in your hand, you can wad it into a ball, you can compact it, you can stretch it out. It's fairly rigid, but you can bend it. There's a lot you can do with it, and it just so happens, of course, this is a 2x6 stud, by the way. I had 2-inch mineral wool insulation, and then I also had regular 3.5 inch, which is exactly what you need to fill a 2x6 stud bay. This is going to sound like a broken record to some of you, but I always buy used, I always buy secondhand, I always buy over purchases and such off Craigslist. And when I see something that might be useful, especially mineral wool at a good price, I buy it. I don't care much what size it is or what thickness it is. And that actually serves me quite well, especially when I run into problems like this, a 2x6 wall. The way this insulation goes in, it's almost satisfying. It's almost one of those YouTube satisfying videos that people publish. The way it comes together, the way it just sort of fits in, the way I cut it and it works just perfectly. It certainly felt satisfying as I was doing it. I knew that this was going to be the last time, and I knew that mineral wool is a superior insulator to what I had before, which was fiberglass. So at this point in the remodel, I'm just not sure what I'm going to do with these wires. So what I ended up doing was cutting them. They were secured to the wall through a conduit. So I cut the conduit and took them out of the conduit, leaving them bare. There's the leftover conduit, which of course was running to my breaker box. It came in right here in the top corner and connected to the breakers. There were 3 of them. My plan at this point was to cut a piece and then drill out some holes to put each wire through individually. That makes it easier to air seal, and so that was my plan. Now that I have a rough idea of what I want to do, I decided to put the mineral wool insulation into that final bay, and then I can proceed with the installation. You'll see when I bring that piece of zip system, I flip it over. And that's because I put the holes on the opposite side that before I had the notch. If you remember from the last episode, I cut a notch out of this piece of zip, and that's what I was running the conduit through. Well, I just flipped it over, drilled the 3 holes, ran the wires through the holes, and the notch now is at the bottom corner. As it would turn out, it's actually easier for me to just use that piece. You could actually see it there in the foreground. I can just reinstall that piece into the notch. And because I have liquid flashing and tape and all these other useful tools at my disposal, it makes it easier than cutting a whole new piece. As a fun aside, this ended up being just a temporary arrangement. I needed electricity in this addition, and I needed to run these wires, but I wasn't totally comfortable about running them through this. This would have put a hole in my siding that I didn't want to do, and I hadn't quite figured out yet exactly what I wanted to do. So this ended up being a temporary fix, but as luck would have it, I could still install this zip system without worrying about it. So you'll see me putting all the screws in as if this is the final install. I'll show you later how I ended up actually running the electricity into this addition. There you got a quick close-up. I put a gasket there to make it easier to air seal. In hindsight, I didn't really need to do this. I think I was doing it just because I wanted to try it out and see how it worked. I could have just used zip liquid flashing, but I wanted to use this gasket for a couple of different reasons. One of them was just to try out the gasket and see if I liked it. As it turns out, I didn't like it much. It's not a very useful gasket. I don't recommend you buying them. They're a Home Depot gasket. It's like a rubberized gasket, and they're not very useful. I don't think they'd hold up. What you can't see me doing right now is I'm actually reconnecting the electricity. So I've reconnected that one wire, left the other two laying out, which is fine. It's not ideal, but it's fine. It's not raining or terrible right now weather, so I can leave that out for a few days or weeks or however long it takes, and then I can resolve it and figure it out later. Now at this stage of the retrofit, I actually have the door that's going to go just to the right of that piece of zip system that I'm installing, but I haven't figured out how to frame it yet or how to install it. So that opening is going to remain open for the foreseeable future. Here I'm going to put the final screws into this piece, and that will be permanently installed now. As I review this footage, it's painful to watch just how many screws I have to put in to each piece of zip system sheathing. Again, get a nail gun if you can, and get one that accommodates long nails. There's my rear end again. Maybe this is just all a scheme. Thanks for watching. Please tune in next time to figure out how I solve my electrical problems. If you'd like a free energy efficiency consultation, please email me at paulspassivehouse@gmail.com.